The morning sun shone off the lake in shimmering ripples, casting a soft gold light across the neatly trimmed lawns of the neighborhood. Birds flitted between the trees lining the water, singing in harmony as if the world itself had no idea what storm was about to unfold. From a distance, the community seemed peaceful, a postcard, perfect suburban oasis where everyone knew everyone else, or at least thought they did. But that peace, I knew, was about to be disrupted in the most absurdly satisfying way. I was standing on the porch of my small lake house, arms crossed, enjoying the calm. The faint scent of pine mixed with the subtle tang of the water in the air. My morning coffee steamed gently in a mug that had seen better days, the ceramic chipped on one side, giving it character. Or at least that's what I liked to tell myself. Life here was quiet, private. I'd moved to the lake precisely for that reason, to escape the endless parade of nosy neighbors and neighborhood politics. Or so I thought. It started with a tap on the railing, light but insistent. I looked up, and there she was, Karen. Karen with her perfectly coiffed hair, carefully manicured nails, and a sun hat that screamed, "I take this very seriously." She stood there holding a clipboard like it was Excalibur, scanning the neighborhood as though she had just discovered a foreign planet that didn't know its place. Her eyes locked on me, and I could feel the full weight of her righteous indignation before she even opened her mouth. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice sharp, like a whistle cutting through the morning calm. "I'm here to discuss your mandatory HOA membership. You can't just do whatever you want. It's against the rules." I raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of my coffee. I leaned against the railing casually, watching her fumble with her clipboard. The clipboard was overstuffed with papers, probably some thick rule book she had memorized, or at least thought she had. "I'm aware of your HOA rules, Karen," I said, letting my words roll out with calm authority. "But my property isn't part of the association." Her face twitched. Just the slightest flicker, like a bird's wing in a storm. Then she straightened, chest puffed, as if posture alone could enforce bylaws. That's impossible," she said. "Everyone joins. Everyone follows the community standards. You can't just opt out." I smiled, the kind of slow, deliberate smile that hints at amusement, patience, and the faintest touch of mischief all at once. "Not everyone, apparently," I said. "And technically, I'm the one who owns this property." For a moment, I could see it in her eyes, disbelief battling with indignation, swirling into panic. The clipboard wavered in her hands, papers rustling like dry leaves in the wind. "Own the property," she stammered, but the HO. "Yes, Karen, the HOA exists. And you exist. But my house isn't part of your association." Surprise. I tilted my head slightly, taking another sip of coffee as though I hadn't just dropped a bomb on the fragile illusion of her authority. Her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes narrowing. She tried to recover, to summon that righteous authority that had made her the self-appointed enforcer of the lake community's aesthetic standards. "Fine. If you refuse to comply, I will call the police." She pulled out her phone with a flourish, like a knight drawing a sword in a duel. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she masked it with determination. "Go ahead," I said, leaning back in my chair with the casual ease of someone who knew exactly how this was going to play out. "Call them. And while you're at it, maybe ask them who your landlord is." Spoiler, it's me. I watched her freeze mid-motion, the phone halfway to her ear, eyes widening in a way that was almost comical if it weren't so deliciously satisfying. Her mouth opened, then closed. She swallowed, a tiny, panicked sound escaping. You can't," she began, but I interrupted. "Oh, I can," I said. "And I do. You're free to enforce all the HOA rules you want on anyone else in the neighborhood, but not here. This property is mine. And before you even think about citing me for violations or fines, maybe read the deed. It's fascinating stuff. Lots of legal jargon." Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the clipboard, and I could see her calculating. Maybe she thought she could intimidate me into compliance. Maybe she thought my calm demeanor masked fear or uncertainty. But no, I was perfectly aware of the power dynamic. She had no leverage. None. And yet here she was, floundering spectacularly. I just want the community to be. She started again, her voice cracking under the weight of her frustration. Standards. You're ruining the neighborhood. Everyone. I interrupted gently. You mean the people who are members of your association, but not me. I didn't ask to be in your club, Karen. And technically, I don't think you can make me join. She blinked rapidly, trying to form words that didn't exist. Her grip on the clipboard tightened so much that her knuckles whitened. I could see the faint tremor of disbelief ripple through her body. I took another slow sip of coffee, letting the moment stretch. There was something satisfying about watching someone realize, ever so slowly, that the world they thought they controlled had quietly, undeniably, slipped from their grasp. Karen straightened, taking a deep breath, trying to summon whatever remained of her composure. I have the right to. Yes, you have the right to call the police, I said, setting down my coffee and finally standing straight. By all means, make the call. I'd love to see that conversation. I have a feeling it won't go quite the way you imagine. Her face paled, and she looked like a deer caught in headlights. The sun sparkled off the lake behind her, reflecting light in her eyes as if mocking her. She opened her mouth, then shut it, then opened it again, finally muttering something about rules and responsibility. Before retreating a step, unsure how to proceed, I leaned back on the railing, smiling faintly. The serenity of the lake returned slowly, birds resuming their songs, the water rippling gently in the morning breeze. And there she stood, Karen, fuming and frozen, clutching a clipboard that had suddenly become an absurdly inadequate weapon in the battle she had chosen to wage. It was going to be an interesting morning. By mid-afternoon, the sun had climbed high enough to cast long shadows across the lakefront, painting the neighborhood in a golden glow that belied the chaos about to unfold. The tranquility of the morning had faded into a peculiar tension, the kind that makes even the most confident person second-guess every move. Karen had disappeared briefly after our confrontation on the porch, only to return moments later with 2 police officers in tow, each looking a mix of professional curiosity and polite restraint. I had been inside, nursing another cup of coffee and pretending to review some papers I had no intention of reading, when the sound of crunching gravel alerted me that the cavalry, or at least the law, had arrived. Stepping onto the porch, I could see them standing there, Karen practically vibrating beside them, clipboard clutched like a shield. Her sun hat had shifted slightly, revealing a crease of panic that had begun to form on her forehead. The taller officer, a man in his late 30s with a calm, methodical presence, cleared his throat and addressed her first. Mom. What seems to be the problem here today? Karen, emboldened by the presence of authority figures, straightened to her full height and tried to project the aura of control she so desperately clung to. She refuses to join the HOA, she said, voice pitched slightly higher than necessary. She's breaking the rules. Someone has to make her comply. I leaned casually against the porch railing, crossing my arms and watching the scene unfold with quiet amusement. The officers exchanged a glance, subtle but unmistakable, as if silently communicating, "Here we go." Officer 2, slightly younger and perhaps a touch more skeptical, stepped forward, glancing briefly at the papers sticking out of Karen's clipboard. "Can you show us any documentation that she is required to join this HOA?" he asked, voice even and professional. Karen blinked rapidly, searching through the pile of neatly organized papers as though sheer determination could conjure proof from thin air. Well, it's in the bylaws, Section 4, Paragraph 7, she stammered. The taller officer raised a hand. "Ma'am, we need to see something official. Signed, filed, legal documentation. Otherwise, we can't enforce anything." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I could almost hear her internal panic building, a crescendo of indignation and disbelief. Finally, She muttered something about irrelevant technicalities before stepping back, muttering under her breath. I cleared my throat gently. Officers, if you don't mind, I have some documentation as well. I motioned toward the table inside, where a neatly organized set of property deeds and ownership papers lay waiting. Officer 2 stepped inside first, taking a quick glance at the documents, and then nodded toward his partner. The look on Karen's face as the taller officer examined the deed was priceless. At first, it was confusion, then disbelief, followed by an almost comical realization. The corners of her mouth twitched involuntarily, and she clutched her clipboard as though it were the only thing keeping her upright in the sudden gravitational shift of reality. "Ma'am," the taller officer began, his voice calm, almost gentle. "According to these documents, you are renting this property." Karen's eyes widened, and she sputtered something that didn't make any sense. I mean, she can't. This is about the HOA. Everyone. I leaned back in my chair, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. Actually, officers, it seems Karen has been attempting to enforce HOA rules on her own landlord. Small detail, I admit, but one worth mentioning. Karen's hands shook slightly, and she took a step backward. I didn't know. I didn't. This isn't. Her voice cracked, the tension finally breaking through the facade of authority she had clung to so desperately. Officer 2 raised an eyebrow. "So, let me get this straight. You're trying to enforce HOA rules on someone who owns the property." Karen opened her mouth again, searching for some justification, some way to reclaim her dignity. "Yes, but it's about community standards," I chuckled softly. "Yes, Karen, community standards. Except that one of the foundational rules of this community, the one you conveniently overlooked, is that the property owner ultimately has the final say." The taller officer gave her a patient look, the kind that said, "We've seen this before. Ma'am, there's nothing illegal about refusing to join an HOA if the property is not part of the association. And in this case, the property owner clearly isn't bound by your HOA bylaws." Karen slumped slightly, clutching her clipboard as if it were a life raft in a sea of humiliation. The sun caught the reflection of the lake in her eyes, highlighting the moment she realized she had been undermining her own authority by attempting to control someone who legally outranked her in this scenario. I stood and walked toward the railing, letting the tension hang in the air for just a moment longer. "You're welcome to enforce all the HOA rules you want on anyone else in the neighborhood," I said, my tone light, almost conversational, "but not here. This house, this property, it's mine. And just for clarity, I'd prefer we maintain a friendly relationship rather than involve law enforcement again." Karen's shoulders sagged completely now, the fight draining from her like water from a slowly opened faucet. She muttered something under her breath, words lost to the wind. Her previous confidence evaporated entirely. The officers, sensing the absurdity of the situation had reached its peak, exchanged another glance. Officer 2 offered a small, sympathetic smile in my direction. "Well, Mom, looks like everything is in order here. No HOA violations to report." I nodded politely, keeping my tone calm and courteous, though I could barely suppress my amusement. "Thank you, officers. I appreciate you taking the time to clarify that." Karen, still trembling slightly, gathered her papers and attempted a dignified retreat, though the very air around her seemed to whisper defeated. As she walked down the driveway, muttering about community standards and unfair treatment, I could see the wheels turning in her head, probably formulating her next ill-advised attempt to assert control. I watched her go, sipping my coffee once more, the lake sparkling behind me as if mocking her. The peaceful rhythm of the water and the gentle rustle of the leaves seemed to celebrate my small but satisfying victory. The neighborhood, serene and unaware, continued on as if nothing had happened. And yet, the legend of Karen's confrontation with her landlord, me, had already been etched into my private memory, ready to be retold with relish at the next suitable opportunity. For the rest of the afternoon, I sat on the porch, occasionally glancing at the lake, feeling the sunlight warm my face. Birds returned to their songs, leaves whispered with the breeze, and the world slowly resumed its ordinary pace. Karen's dramatic entrance, her frantic gestures, the absurdity of trying to police her own landlord, it all felt like a scene from a comedy, one I was fortunate enough to star in. And as the day drifted lazily toward evening, I realized just how much satisfaction there is in quietly winning without a fight, letting someone else's overconfidence and entitlement collapse under its own weight. Karen had learned, perhaps a little too late, that rules only matter when you actually have the authority to enforce them. And me, I had coffee, peace, and a story I would savor for years.